What is going on YouTube? It is your boy GZTV. We are back with another video, and in this video we are going to be reviewing the 2003 South Korean psychological horror film written and directed by Kim Ji-woon. We have A Tale of Two Sisters, and this is actually the final scratch it poster we have on the list. This is the last horror movie we will be reviewing for a while, as I will be getting into a lot of comedy movies in the coming weeks. Obviously, first, before we do that, we're going to get into the John Wick franchise. Sorry about that. And we're going to be getting into the Extraction franchise. So definitely some stuff in the way, but yeah, we're going to get into a lot of comedy, stuff that's not horror. It's not that I'm burnt out of horror, I just feel like I need to visit other genres, because people don't just want to watch someone, review horror all day. And I know some of you do, and I know some of you guys are horror junkies, but that's just not going to be the case around here. This is obviously like like a foreign film, an international movie. So I don't really have a lot of background on it, so there's not much to say about that. So let's just get straight into it. We're going to talk about the premise, and then the good, the bad, and the okay. So getting into the premise, so the story follows two sisters by the name of Sumi and Su-yeon. I think that's how you say their names. They return to their childhood home after being institutionalized, but it is later revealed through a bunch of revelations that Su-yeon died before Sumi was taken to the mental hospital, where she was treated for shock and psychosis, and she must have been some sort of like hallucination or something. She must have been like picturing her sister to be there. I don't know. She returned to their secluded estate in the countryside, where their father has remarried. Yeah, and there's all sorts of reveals for this movie, which I guess we'll discuss later. There's a lot of positives, negatives, and decent aspects about this movie, kind of surrounding the revelations and the strategy to kind of reveal things when they did in this movie. So the siblings, I put that in quotations because technically Su-yeon died before any of this started, before she even went to the mental hospital. They immediately take a disliking to the new wife. They don't like her. They don't like her mannerisms, how she parents them. None of that. So throughout the film, strange events take place, which lead to some surprising revelations, all sorts of truths learned about their past. Everything kind of gets explained. So yeah, it's a pretty strange movie. There's kind of like some hallucination, like spiritual aspects of the movie, demonic aspects of the movie. It's a very interesting story. So with that being said, I think we can just get into the good, the bad, and the okay. So getting into the good, I feel like this movie has a lot of nostalgia to it. Obviously growing up in the 2000s, I'm a pretty young guy. I'm very young to be reviewing movies in this space. Everyone else I see do this are like 10 to 20 years much older than me. But it's very true to the 2000s era of horror movies, which I can really appreciate about it. It's really cool. I really liked that style. That was a really good time period. It wasn't a great time period, but it was a pretty good time period for horror movies, I think. I really love the style of camera work, and especially during the 2000s, this is really where psychological horror started to really gain prominence, and this movie was a part of that, despite being overseas, and not a lot of people in this country even know about this movie today. But the shots look really cool in this movie. The cinematography was great, with the mirrors, with, the camera, like, speeding ahead. It was cool. There were a lot of really cool things to admire about this movie. The director did great at making this a genuinely scary experience, despite some of the negatives we're about to discuss. It was genuinely scary. This was pretty creepy. I feel like there were actual jump scares in this movie, and this is the first movie I've seen and I've talked about on this channel in a long time where I've seen jump scares in it. And I think that's really cool. Obviously, it can get corny, it can get overused in this genre, but it's still really awesome to watch and, go back, because that was such a huge, technique used in horror, the whole idea of a jump scare. Even if you knew something was coming, it still scared the shit out of you with like the sound effects and the camera work and all that stuff. The weight of the tragedy at the end really hits, despite it taking the whole movie to get to this point. You really feel it. It's really emotional. It really shows you the terrible things people do to each other, and I really like that. I really like how personal of an experience it makes it. Yeah, it's pretty messed up, which is a good thing in horror. You want to have, that emotion evoked out of your audience. So with that being said, let's get into the bad. Oh, and one thing I forgot about the acting was really good. I actually really liked the performances, although some of the dialogue can be bland. There were points in this movie where the acting was great, and there's not a lot of opportunities for acting at times in this movie, but they did a good job. So getting into the bad thing is throughout pretty much 90% of the movie, you're pretty much clueless of what is happening. You know, you get some of the plot points and you can kind of pick up on some of them, but there's other things that happen. And you're like, why the hell is it like this? Why do they not like this woman? You know? It sucks because the revelations are pretty big time, like finding out Su-yeon has been dead all along and has been a figment of Sumi's pretty much distorted and mental imagination. Or like finding out that their father had an affair with Eun-ju, who was their former nurse, who is the girl, obviously, that, is present throughout the movie as their mother, supposedly. This was all happening while their terminally ill mother was alive. And their mother ends up hanging herself because of this affair. And you're kind of looking at this, and it's like, this is supposed to hold a lot of weight, but it doesn't when you can't understand what was happening, and when they wait so damn long to make these things known. I think there's not a lot of negatives to this film. That's one of the major ones, though, is that, wow, all the way up until the last, 20 minutes of the movie, it's like, what is going on? Why are these girls lashing out? Why is there this spirit in the house? And then you realize, oh, their mother hung herself in the wardrobe, and this was kind of like a demonic spirit of her, and she came back. And it's like, well, okay, we could have learned about that throughout the film to kind of explain what was happening, so then we were like, okay, that makes sense, and it makes it a lot more menacing. But no, unfortunately, we wait till the end. We'll talk about that a little more in depth soon. I think the okay part of the film is just the fact that they made that decision to explain everything at the end. It's just that decision. Because you still get it. A lot of movies, a lot of TV shows and franchises and whatnot leave a lot of things untold. And this movie wants to be a standalone film. It wants to, let you know everything that happens. It still sucks because these are super significant events in these kids' lives, and now in Sumi's life, who has to deal with the death of her sister, the death of her mother, all these things. She wasn't even aware of these two deaths until, pretty much, years after they happened, I would assume. So it could have been used to explain what's going on throughout the movie, and Sumi is in mass hysteria through the movie, and you don't really understand why, but she went into shock because of the death of her mother. So that would have made sense if they would have decided to tell that, you know. Some of the ways they implement horror throughout too are I'm a little bit mixed on. I'm not a huge fan of this whole horror trope of using girls' periods to tell stories and have this horror behind it, it's some sort of ritual, and there's a bunch of different things that people try to do with women's menstruation throughout horror films. I've never really liked it. I can't necessarily think of another movie that does that. There was one recently we watched, but it's just so dumb. It's goofy. There were some goofy horror aspects, but then again, it doesn't really change your watching aspect. I guess, explaining everything at the end of the film definitely changes things, but I put that in the mixed aspect because at least we know what happened. So, yeah, I can let some of that stuff slide in the okay. With that being said, I think we can just get into the review. This is going to be a short video. Here we go, getting into the review. Or the rating, whatever you want to call it. Let's pull up the tier list. This is a pretty good movie. It's quite confusing, and maybe that is the art of it. Maybe that's what the director, I already forgot his or her name, but maybe that's art of it. I feel like the direction they took for this movie was very unique and refreshing, especially for a foreign film. The directing is really good. And with all that being said, I'm gonna give this an 8.6 out of 10. I know you guys didn't necessarily expect me to give this movie that high of a rating, but I can really appreciate what they're trying to do here. I can really appreciate, the order of the film just being so unique and them trying something different. Because again, like I said with Let the Right One In, this movie does a really good job at distinguishing itself, making itself, stand out compared to a lot of the type of movies that came out during its time. This whole psychological horror genre that was really taking a charge at the time. I really like what they did with it. although it still leaves kind of a bitter taste in your mouth, and that's why it's not really a 9 to 9.9. That's not why it's not eerie and exceptional. But with that being said, it's alarmingly amazing. So yeah, that's gonna do it for the video. There's a fly. I already know you guys saw that in the camera just now, but it's been your boy GZTV. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. This is the last movie review we're going to do horror-wise. This is the last Scratch It poster. We have completed it. I am super happy about that. What a journey. I really appreciate some of you guys that were sticking around for me to do that whole thing. There are a lot of super abstract films that I never would have heard of without Scratch It, so shout out to them. But I'm out, guys. 8.6 out of 10. Let me know what you think of that rating. Let me know what you guys would rate it out of 10. Really good movie to me. Really solid. So, yeah, with that being said, I'm out, guys.